First thing is that the money you were stealing, in addition to your income and the money you were borrowing, was not just to pay for drugs. Would you agree with that?
Sure.
All right. And would you agree that your stealing, in addition to the money you were borrowing, increased over the years as we moved towards June of 2021? Would you agree that your stealing increased over the years as we move towards June of 2021?
Yes, sir.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Where does the money trail lead? Where do Murdaugh's millions, where does that rabbit hole go? Now, according to Mark Tinsley, the attorney for Mallory Beach's family, she told the Daily Mail that he has no idea where all of Murdaugh's assets went. He said, "I wish I knew." He says that Murdaugh was converting everything into cash. Cash for what? And I think if you really want to understand the motive in this case, if you really want to understand the man, if you really want to get to the meat and potatoes, nuts and bolts of it, we have to follow the money. And I think an early misconception is that Murdaugh couldn't possibly have consumed $60,000 a week on oxycodone. But the experts say a hardened user could, a habituated user could. But that's not the end of the story. That's not where all of the money went. That's just where a lot of the money went. And so even if that's true, that he spent a lot of money on drugs, and from the clip that you heard right at the beginning, just as a drug user becomes habituated and needs more drugs, well, if you're stealing money for drugs, you're going to need to steal more money for drugs, right? But it wasn't only for drugs, it was for other things as well. And so obviously the drug money doesn't account for all of the Murdaugh moolah. Does that make sense? And I do think it's about time that we went into the money rabbit hole. It's not just as simple as drug money or whatever else you want to say it was. So let's try and figure out what it was. And that's going to help us understand the drug narrative better in a more complete way. Also the fraud schemes better, and everything else. Not to mention, we're going to get to know Murdaugh himself as well as his criminal psychology, the actual criminal psychology that we're talking about here. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. By the way, I will be doing some analysis of Murdaugh's testimony over the course of the next few days, so look out for that. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So, do you think that there's any doubt that the Murdaugh family, especially the patriarch, were living the good life in the last 5 years, the last 10 years, at the time of the boating incident as well? Now, according to the Daily Mail, the court has heard that Murdaugh earned a 7-figure salary and owned lavish properties from Hampton County to Edisto Beach in South Carolina. The family also drove top-of-the-range vehicles, expensive vehicles, Mercedes as well, wore designer clothing, and had hunting rifles worth $10,000. They hunted with rifles that were worth $10,000. That's $10,000 a piece, as far as I understand. Which means Murdaugh's entire gun collection was a huge collection, that alone, and it was like almost the sort of stuff that you could finance an army with, or a militia. That alone had to have been worth a fortune. Do you agree with that? So that's one area where there's quite a lot of money. He also made large donations according to the Daily Mail, to the Democratic Party, $2,700 each for Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden to support their respective campaigns in 2015 and as recently as 2020. I don't know whether I'd agree with the Daily Mail saying that $2,700 is a lot of money, but anyway, one does wonder, were there other donations that we don't know of that were quite large? According to the Daily Mail, at state level, records show $140,000 in donations made between Murdaugh, his family, and the law firm over the past decade. That's also not a large amount of money given how much money there was, how big that pot of gold actually was and how deep it was. 140,000 when you're talking about 14 million is petty cash, right? According to the article, Murdaugh also made philanthropic donations to local foundations. We don't really know how much that is, but given the 140,000, it probably wasn't terribly significant either. The article goes on to say the hunting lodge at Murdaugh is due to be sold for more than 4 million. That was something that actually belonged to Maggie, which Murdaugh then bought. And I'm not sure whether he bought that with ill-gotten gains as well. Anyway, while a judge approved the sale of his Edisto beach home, that was actually a property co-owned, but actually where Maggie was living. But after she died, he basically inherited it. A nice, cool, almost $1 million that he inherited after she was killed. And so, is there any doubt that they lived large? Is there any doubt that there was quite extensive properties that they owned? And I think that begins to address how you can get into serious debt. Well, you buy houses, right? You buy properties. So what is that explanation? How did Richie Rich fill his basement with gold coins? And what happened to that basement filled with, what happened to those gold coins? Now, according to Netflix, and that's something else I really want to be doing, is providing a bit of a review of the Netflix documentary that was released last week Wednesday. It reveals, it's quite interesting what the Daily Mail says, that it would take 114 years to consume, for one individual, to consume $10 million worth of pills. And Murdaugh said that he was spending $60,000 a week on drugs that would buy, according to their calculation, 750 of the best pills at $80 each. Now, I think the person you really need to talk to is an addict. And I've seen some comments on my various platforms where they say that is actually possible. If you're sufficiently addicted, that is actually possible. And so the article says it is physically impossible for even the most seasoned addict to consume that many pills. So where did all the money go? Well, some people will say it is possible. And I think the other thing to consider is it's not necessarily one person buying drugs for one person. You could actually have one person buying drugs for themselves, their pals, their mistress, whatever it is. It could be a whole harem of people. Right, could be a whole bunch of people, and if he's got the assistance of gang members, then those folks as well. So, what do the facts say about Murdaugh's addiction? Well, what we know is that between October 2013 and September 2021, right, that's 8 years, Murdaugh and Smith, that was his accomplice, along with quote-unquote persons unknown and unknown, conspired to buy and distribute oxycodone. So can you see he wasn't just buying drugs for himself, he was buying drugs to also resell them. And so what if Murdaugh was also feeding someone else's addiction? During that time, between October 2013 and September 2021, Murdaugh was accused of providing just his accomplice, with almost over 400 checks, 437 checks, totaling more than 2.4 million. That was really basically just for drug running, right? And so, can you see he was running some sort of shadow side operation? And perhaps a lot of money was also needed to grease palms as well. If you're a lawyer and you're breaking the law and you're doing sort of nefarious work on the side in the shadows, it's very important that you keep that quiet. And so isn't the way that you would achieve that, you buy people, right? That's the one explanation. So hush money. Another one is robbing Peter to pay Paul. So what may sort of answer the money riddle is this idea of a spoiled rich kid, that's the young Murdaugh, who can't help himself at the drug trough, right? And it just becomes the snowball, and that leads to becoming a glutton at the money trough. The drug habit leads to him treating money as a sort of infinite resource that he can just sort of play with. And it's not just easy money from fraud, but loans from family, loans from colleagues, loans from multiple banks, sort of money coming out of the woodwork. Now, according to the Daily Mail, Waters told the trial that's the prosecutor, that Murdaugh was living in a velocity of money that is really quite stunning. Really a good turn of phrase. And he said that Murdaugh constantly needed to achieve more money to avoid the reckoning that was coming. And so, what does that mean in practice? Practically, what does that mean? To need more money to avoid a reckoning. Well, I think to some extent, you would want to stave off legal action. So you might need to hire lawyers to deal with certain situations. That's the proper way, I suppose, or the white collar way to some extent to deal with a legal issue. But then there's also the other way, which is you could grease paws and do that sort of thing to frustrate the legal process. According to the article, in some cases he was stealing millions from clients in order to pay back other clients he had stolen from. So in the same way you have the snowball effect of you are using more and more drugs and you need more and more money, and then you also have like a drug sideshow on the side, and that also requires more and more money. You can also have a situation where next to that you're stealing from clients, and then you steal from other clients to pay back those clients when that reckoning comes. According to the article, prosecutors have said that his finances took a turn for the worse. So all of this started, this whole snowball really started rolling in 2008 during that recession. He was in a certain position financially. Perhaps he had family money and perhaps he had some wealth from his work. And then he made investments in 2008, and then all of that kind of went really badly downhill after the recession. And according to the prosecutor, this sent him down an incessant financial roller coaster. So that is really what started debt, the debt burden that he found himself in. And that was also how he started practicing trying to outrun this avalanche, right? Trying to buy himself time, trying to dodge all of this stuff that was kind of falling down around him. And so what you really see is it starts with huge debts about 15 years ago. And over 15 years, his attempts to dodge and postpone them, and all the lies, all the obfuscation, all the manipulation, all the deception builds up. It gets bigger and bigger, worse and worse as the snowball gets worse and worse. And then doesn't that lead to murder? Doesn't that lead to murder? According to the article, at the time of his wife and son's murders, Murdaugh was being sued by Tinsley over Paul Murdaugh's, his son's, Pawpaw's drunken boat crash, which killed 19-year-old Mallory in February 2019, right? We know that. That's not news. According to the article, the prosecution says he racked up millions in debt, and he was out of time and out of options by February 2019. So right now the unraveling is sort of speeding up. Again, none of this is news. But I think this is, at least it was to me, maybe this might be news to you. Did you know that as well as the boat wreck case, Murdaugh was confronted on the same day as the murders over $792,000 that had gone missing from his law firm? And a lot of people have said, I don't really think this is a lot of money for him. I don't think that's a lot of money for him. But cumulatively, there's a lot of money coming and going, cumulatively. But if you don't have money and you're borrowing and stealing money, and the money that you're getting isn't like a regular income, it's from debts and from fraud and all that sort of thing, well, you're kind of running on a carpet that is about to be pulled out from under you. And so if it turns out you've got a real dollar value there, you owe $792,000 and you don't actually have that money because you're losing money all over the place, then that is a significant sum. And so it does seem like Murdaugh may have regarded that as a significant sum. Does that make sense? And it's serious as well. It's not like he can dodge and defer when it's from the law firm, when his law firm is saying to him, okay, you owe us this money, pay up. And so the chief financial officer at that law firm would soon discover that he'd stolen far more than that amount. So it's not just that amount, it's also a lot of other money that is about to come to light. And that is probably what set the bells off in Murdaugh's mind. Do you agree with that? So the murders appear to be yet another ploy out of thousands of minor little ploys and sort of small little schemes to delay, to dodge, to avoid this financial bullet and that one. And over a long period, I think it was a skill that Murdaugh honed over decades of tomfoolery and skullduggery. And so when we see Murdaugh on the stand, he's back to the same default setting of dodging questions and making lengthy excuses. One imagines this was the way he spoke to everyone around him, long-winded excuses that from anyone else wouldn't really carry much weight. But coming from him, because of his family, because of his influence, he was able to get away with it. And that taught him something. I can get away with whatever I want. Well, until now. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.